On our broadcast tonight, unfavorable weather and tidal conditions hamper search and rescue operations for the sunken Sewol-ho ferry. Meanwhile, a newly released video shows the ship's crew fleeing the vessel without warning passengers. With the government under fire for its mismanagement of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster and the Prime Minister's resignation, speculation is brewing that a major cabinet reshuffle is on the horizon. Plus, North Korea strongly rebukes President Park Geun-hye and U.S. President Barack Obama's reaffirmation last Friday that they stand united in confronting North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Primetime News begins now. Welcome to Primetime News. It's Monday, April 28th here in Seoul. I'm Choi Yu-sun.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been almost 2 weeks now since the tragic Sewol-ho ferry disaster put the nation in a state of shock and sorrow. The number of confirmed deaths currently stands at 189, while 113 others, mostly high school students, remain missing and are presumed dead.
And for the latest, we're now joined by our Kwon So-a here in the studio. So not much to update on since on the search and rescue operation in recent days.
Yes, Yusun. Rescue crews have had a hard time with the harsh weather conditions. Only one body has been recovered today. That was just about after 2 p.m. Now, a strong wind advisory in the area was lifted earlier in the day, but the tides are what's causing trouble since the underwater currents are much faster than can be seen above water. And fog and rain have added to the bad conditions. The search operations are temporarily halted at this hour as they have been on and off throughout much of the day, actually, while the number of rescue boats on standby at the accident site has significantly decreased. When divers were in the water, they mainly focused on the 4th floor of the ferry, where most of the remaining missing are believed to be and where they found that body earlier. Now, so far, around a third of the 111 cabins have been searched.
So earlier today, a video was released by authorities that showed the captain and the crew of the vessel during the first moments of the rescue situation. What else did we learn?
Oh, that's right. Well, that video is very crucial in determining the very first minutes of the rescue efforts, how they were carried out, but also in proving that the captain and the rest of the crew were among the first who fled the ship. The central focus of the nearly 10 minutes of footage taken by a member of the rescue team is the period between 9:43 a.m. and 9:49 a.m. It shows the captain of the Sewol-ho ferry, Lee Jun-suk, and his crew fleeing without attending to passengers. The captain was not wearing his uniform or pants as he left the vessel with the help of the Coast Guard, meaning the rescuers were unable to distinguish him as being the captain. By 9:35 a.m., all 15 crew members had begun fleeing the ship. But as the video shows, hardly any passengers could be seen on the deck of the ferry, raising criticism that the crew did not give an order to them to leave the ship.
And the prosecution special investigative unit is still continuing to search for who's responsible ultimately for the sinking. What's the latest there?
Exactly, Sean. The number of subjects in the probe is increasing. Investigations into the ferry operator's practical owner, Yoo Byung-on, continue as prosecutors that is raided 4 locations in Seoul, Daegu, and Gyeonggi-do province this morning, looking for evidence of paper companies. Prosecutors say at least 3 companies fit that description. Now, they also raided the Mokpo Coast Guard station, suspecting officers there neglected their duties in the early stages of the rescue. The Special Investigative Team has also arrested 3 members of the Korea Shipping Association, including the head of the Incheon branch, for destroying evidence in relation to the case. Investigations into whether the Sewol-ho ferry had malfunctioning lifeboats and life jackets on board will also likely expand. Investigators believe the equipment may have been in use ever since they were manufactured discovered in 1994. And this comes as earlier today, 5 lifeboats were found floating near the accident site, meaning they began to work much later than they should have. Normally, a lifeboat would deploy automatically when receiving external pressure.
So we also learned today about the last text message that was sent by a passenger inside the ship.
Yes, investigations revealed that at 10:17 a.m. on the day of the accident, a message sent via the messaging service KakaoTalk was the last reception from a mobile phone inside the ship. It apparently came from a student. That was around 10 minutes before the last survivor was saved. The investigation headquarters is analyzing around 400 messages and pictures sent through KakaoTalk to get a clearer image of what happened on the day of the tragic accident.
Okay, so thank you so much for that report.
My pleasure.
Memorial altars for the victims of the Sewol-ho tragedy have been set up nationwide in 17 different cities and provinces.
The altars will be open to the public 24 hours a day. The memorial altar at Seoul Plaza is officially open to the public from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. However, anyone can pay their respects at other times as well. And a temporary altar set up at Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall in the city hit hardest by the ferry disaster has its last day open to the public until midnight today. Starting 10 a.m. on Tuesday, an official altar in Ansan will be set up at Arirang Park. The altars are expected to remain in place until all those who died in the disaster are returned to their families.
Amid nationwide outrage over the government's slow response to the tragedy, speculation is brewing the president would soon swing the axe and make sweeping changes to her cabinet. President Park, who approved the prime minister's resignation on Sunday, wants him to wait until the ferry disaster has been brought under control. Kim Young-gil has more.
Faith in the government has eroded over the past couple of weeks due to its poor handling of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. With Prime Minister Chung Hong-won's resignation, there's mounting speculation a large-scale reshuffling of the cabinet is on the way to appease public anger and give the Park administration fresh impetus. Political watchers say a number of high-level officials could get the chop, including Security and Public Administration Minister Kang Byung-gyu, Education Minister Seo Nam-soo, and Oceans and Fisheries Minister Lee Ju-young. A number of ministers have come in for fierce criticism for their misconduct and remarks following the sinking. The ruling's Henry Party says a reshuffle will give momentum to reforms in the country to prevent a similar disaster occurring again. A parliamentary committee has decided to deliberate on 7 bills related to safety at sea, while the Henry Party plans to propose new bills to eradicate bureaucratic connections with related maritime industries. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is also preparing to unveil its own ideas on how to improve public safety. As the June 4th local elections edge ever closer, President Park's tumbling approval rating could damage the Henry Party's chances. The opposition party is expected to continue attacking the ruling party over Chung's resignation and its mishandling of the ferry disaster. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, as the whole country remains rocked over the fatal ferry disaster, many people are still in mourning and are spending less and refraining from leisure activities. And this is casting a cloud on the nation's road to economic recovery. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
Around 250 events and cultural festivals were canceled across the nation after the Sewol-ho ferry submerged in waters off the southern coast of Korea last Wednesday. Tourism companies are also facing major cancellations as the Education Ministry banned all school trips in the first half of this year, while the whole nation is grieving with the families of the victims. Retail shops are also taking a hit. Sales at one of the country's main department stores, Lotte, dropped nearly 1% in the week following the ferry accident compared to the same period a year earlier. Sales of women's clothing in particular dropped more than 4% from the previous year, pointing to a social phenomenon that many of those suffering from depression after the disaster are females. In fact, the shock of a large-scale disaster has shown to impact the economy. After the September 11th terror attacks in the United States, retail sales in September dropped nearly 2.5% on month, falling to its lowest level in 9 years. Korea's private spending also dropped 0.8 percentage points in the third quarter of 1995, right after the Sampoong department store collapsed in June of that year. While the consumer sentiment remained unchanged for 3 straight months in April, according to the Bank of Korea, experts are concerned that the recent ferry disaster could flag the moderate pace of economic recovery. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
North Korea has ramped up tensions on the Korean peninsula with statements indicating no hope for inter-Korean relations. Pyongyang expressed disapproval today over Seoul and Washington's affirmations last week to firmly respond to any North Korean provocation. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports on how North Korea says it will not give up its nuclear arms just because the United States tells it to.
North Korea has labeled inter-Korean relations hopeless in its first official reaction to last week's summit between South Korea and the United States. On Sunday, North Korea's Committee for the Peaceful Reunification of Korea, which handles cross-border affairs, bluntly criticized President Park Geun-hye, calling her a wicked traitor and a despicable prostitute selling off the nation. It said the outcome of President Obama's trip to South Korea clearly justified North Korea's determination to counter the U.S. by force and settle the conflict with an all-out nuclear showdown. South Korea's Unification Ministry said North Korea's rhetoric was a violation of an inter-Korean agreement to stop cross-border slandering reached in February. Following Friday's summit talks in Seoul, the South Korean and U.S. leaders vowed to stand shoulder to shoulder against any North Korean provocation. North Korea has been ratcheting up tensions lately, following its threat last month to conduct a new type of a nuclear test. Recent satellite imagery has shown increased activity at the regime's nuclear test site. South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are concerned the upcoming test could be larger than North Korea's 3 previous tests. The latest rhetoric out of Pyongyang comes as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un revealed plans on Sunday to develop the regime's military prowess for a confrontation with the United States. Experts view the recent escalation in tensions as Pyongyang's attempt to justify itself ahead of its 4th nuclear test. South Korea's defense ministry said last week the North warned of something big and unimaginable for its enemies before April 30th. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The U.S. President Barack Obama hopes his Spring Asia tour will tighten regional relations. It did spark off another round of rhetoric from North Korea, and its effect on Korea-Japan ties remains unclear.
And to give us more insight into the U.S. leaders' recent round of diplomacy, we're now joined by Professor Nam Chang-hee from Inha University. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Professor, North Korea essentially said it's going to throw in the towel on inter-Korean relations under the Park administration. How sincere do you think this sentiment is, or is there another purpose behind such words?
Well, before the 2 presidents of Korea and United States met a few days ago, Pyongyang signaled that a 4th nuclear test was possible, and intelligence community of Seoul and Washington has detected a move related to the test in northeastern region of North Korea. Unless China does, in a way, to curb North Korea's ambition to, expand its nuclear capabilities, I see a possibility of Pyongyang's test detonation of nuclear devices sometime later this year, showing off their more advanced nuclear capabilities, I'm afraid.
Well, aside from their firm stance on North Korea's nuclear program and calling on China to more actively persuade its ally to disarm, Seoul and Washington don't seem to have come up with a tangible way to curb North Korea's nuclear program. What do you think about that?
Well, the concerted efforts of the 2 allies will have some limited effect to deter another nuclear test of Pyongyang. The best solution is putting joint Korea, US, Japan trilateral pressure on Pyongyang with full-fledged support of Beijing. But Beijing says that putting pressure on Pyongyang is a mission impossible. But everybody knows that Beijing is the only and the largest provider of economic lifeline to North Korea.
Well, speaking of joint efforts, for the first time ever, Presidents Park and Obama visited the Combined Forces Command together. What kind of message do you think this sent?
Well, you know, the ROK-US Combined Forces Command was installed in 1978 during the late President Park Chung-hee administration. And the reason why the two presidents made a joint visit to the post is to demonstrate their strong will of the allies against Pyongyang's provocation, I think, yes.
Well, following Presidents Park and Obama's summit on Friday, North Korea revealed that it has another American in its custody. What do you think is Pyongyang's motive behind this?
Well, Pyongyang has a tradition of using this kind of humanitarian matter for opening a temporary diplomatic channel with Washington through inviting American envoy to the Forbidden Kingdom. So maybe on the one hand, they are threatening us to, test, detonate another nuclear devices, but on the other hand, and at the same time, they are seeking for, another diplomatic meeting with Washington, I guess.
President Obama referred to Japan's wartime sexual slavery issue. How effective do you think his words will be on Korea and Japan relations?
Well, I doubt President Obama's remark will make a fundamental shift in the way that Japanese right-wing politicians handle the past history issue. Should Seoul extend some omoiyari or diplomatic win-win solution, Tokyo, now after the explicit warning of President Obama, might be more attentive to the proposal, I hope.
All right, Professor, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
It's time to check on stories making headlines on the global front. From rising tensions in Ukraine to civil unrest in Egypt, we go live to our Paul Lee at the News Center.
So, Paul, let's start with Ukraine. We've seen clashes on the ground continuing to erupt in the eastern part of the country. But what's the latest development on the diplomatic front?
Well, right now, there are no signs of tensions letting up. The United States has announced fresh sanctions against Russia for allegedly funding and coordinating pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. The Kremlin denies the accusation and says the uprising is a spontaneous response. Ambassadors from 28 EU member nations are also meeting in Brussels at this hour to decide on a totally separate set of sanctions against Russia. Obama said the sanctions would represent the next stage in trying to curb Moscow's efforts to destabilize the region.
We don't yet know whether it's going to work. And that's why the next phase, if in fact we saw further Russian aggression towards Ukraine, could be sectoral sanctions, less narrowly targeted, addressing sectors like banking or the defense industry.
Meanwhile, the mayor of Kharkiv has been shot and critically wounded. Hernandy Kernez was reportedly shot in the back by unknown gunmen and is said to be undergoing emergency surgery. This comes as pro-Russian rebels continue to seize more public buildings in other major cities in eastern Ukraine. And taking a look at Southeast Asia, U.S. President Obama has arrived in the Philippines as part of his ongoing diplomatic tour of Asia-Pacific. According to the White House, President Obama is aiming to boost bilateral trade and reaffirm Washington's commitment to the region. Obama and Philippine President Benigno Aquino are set to hold a closed-door meeting on Monday to discuss these very issues. Regional security is also expected to dominate their discussions. Prior to Obama's arrival, the U.S. ambassador to Manila and the Philippine defense chief signed a defense agreement which would pave the way for more U.S. troops as well as military vessels and aircraft throughout the country. The U.S. president is on the last leg of his four-nation trip that included stops in Japan, Korea, and Malaysia. Obama said he hopes to alleviate concerns from allies about whether the U.S. will come to their defense amid China's growing assertiveness over regional territorial claims. And shifting our focus to the United States, where a massive storm system has ripped across the Midwest. At least 17 people have reportedly been killed by the tornadoes, with a majority of those victims living in Little Rock, Arkansas. Local residents say the winds were so strong that houses were pulled off their foundations.
You know, I saw some of the biggest trees just turned upside down, and literally the houses picked up and sat on top of cars. It was, you know, over there, some of the garages are just literally out, the cars in the garage, in the yard.
Officials say the tornadoes have damaged buildings as far as Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri. Rescue workers have been working through the night to search for survivors. A state of emergency has also been declared in 4 Arkansas counties, allowing the National Guard to assist in relief operations. And finally, let's turn to Egypt. Protests erupted outside a courthouse in the southern city of Menai as the final ruling was handed down in the mass trial of hundreds of supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Egyptian court recommended the death penalty for the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, Mohammed Badieh, and 682 supporters. The hearings have drawn widespread criticism as the court prevented the defense from presenting their case.
The right to a defense was breached. In a normal case with a defendant who killed someone, it takes 1 or 2 years. But here, it was wrapped up after the first session directly.
Egypt's top Islamic authority, the Grand Mufti, will have now until June to approve or reject the death sentences. However, this decision is widely considered to be a formality. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. The 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games may be a couple of years away, but preparations are in full swing. The Korea Olympic Committee met on Monday to finalize their construction proposal. It involves building 6 new facilities and upgrading 2 others to go with the 5 existing venues over in Gangwon-do Province. The 699.3 billion won, or almost $676 million project is projected to be completed by October 2016. The plan will be presented on Tuesday to an International Olympic Committee delegation led by Vice President Gunilla Lindberg, which is here to oversee the process. And heading to the greens, the PGA Tour's Zurich Classic of New Orleans wrapped up with South Korean No Seung-yeol, its champion. The 22-year-old beat out the rest of the field by 2 strokes to end at 19 under par. Lifting the trophy and taking home the $1.2 million prize, he becomes the 5th Korean to ever win on the tour. And shifting to the LPGA, teenage phenom Lydia Ko came in first at the Swinging Skirts LPGA Classic for her first win after turning pro late last year. Ko, who celebrated her 17th birthday just days ago, held off world number 3 Stacey Lewis to finish at 12 under par. She won 2 previous events on the tour, back-to-back victories at the CN Canadian Women's Open, but they came as an amateur. And leaving that there, let's get to football news. Liverpool's Luis Suarez has been named the Professional Footballers Association's Player of the Year. The 27-year-old Uruguayan was chosen as the Premier League's top player this season by his peers. Sweet redemption after his reputation took a hit for biting an opponent last season. However, it comes after his team's 2-0 loss to Chelsea, which put a dent in their title hopes with 2 fixtures remaining. And coming full circle, let's end with a look at the current standings in the KBO. And looking at the top of the order, Nexon remains at first for yet another week, despite losing their series to Samsung 2-1. NC and SK remain steady at second and third, while Tucson climbs into the top 4. And looking at the rest of the chart, Samsung wins 7 of their last 10 to climb up to 5th with Lotte. Meanwhile, Kia, Hanwha, and LG grace the bottom of the list with sub-500 records. And that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
It was a drizzly day here in Seoul, and weather conditions are dampening further progress on rescue operations at Chindo.
For details, we turn things over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung?
Guys, rain has picked up again on Chindo. Well, so far the area has already received about 126 millimeters of rain, with another 20 millimeters expected to fall overnight. Foggy conditions along with fast tidal currents are still making things difficult for rescue operations. Shifting gears now to other parts of the country, the nation is under the influence of a low pressure trough from the West Sea, which is why we're seeing cloudy and drizzly skies across the nation. Currently, rain is falling mostly over the central regions, while sporadic showers are dropping over the south, so be aware of the wet roads. Similar conditions are expected through tomorrow morning. However, those down south may want to keep an umbrella handy through Tuesday evening. Moving on to tomorrow's readings, Seoul, Daegu, and Busan reach 18 degrees while Gwangju hits 17. Moving on to other places, it will be a cloudy day on Jeju with a daytime high of 19 degrees while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 14 and 8. That's all for now, and I'll see you again after midnight.
Thanks, Bo-kyung, and that's our broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Choi Yu-sun in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.